I was born and grew up in a town called Lusaka in Zambia, the capital of Zambia, where I found a keen interest in art. I was always a pretty average student, but when it came to art, I really enjoyed it, and it really sort of showed in my in my grades. And as a result, I was crowned king, and those are my early roots. I then moved to Grahamstown, a little town in South Africa along near the coast, near Port Elizabeth. They had a pretty good art department there where I studied fine art under apprenticeship of the great Leonardo da Vinci. He taught me a lot of stuff, especially about art and things and drawings, which is where I got my inspiration from to get into the visual effects industry. Soon after I got my degree, I moved to Johannesburg, and in Johannesburg I did a couple of random art jobs until I got connected to a friend of mine who was working sort of in the commercial sector, the film industry, and he got me an interview with Christian van der Walt, who currently owns a studio called Sinister Studio. And I think once I went for the interview, Christian, it was very apparent that I was very, very interested and very keen to do whatever I needed to do to get into this industry. Because when I walked in for the interview, on his screen he was animating a horse's leg that was bursting through dust and sand, and I was just blown away that this technology existed in a country that I was in, and it just completely blew me away. And Christian, I think, saw how eager I was, and it was a pretty easy decision, I think, on his part, that he could use somebody who was passionate and really keen to do beautiful work. So while I was at Sinister, I started off as a compositor primarily, and as the years went on, I found a keen interest in 3D. When I first joined, it was very difficult to actually get software, because it was very expensive. Stuff like Maya, 3D Max was all very, very expensive, and you could only essentially get a 30-day trial, and 30 days is just not enough to actually get into the really deep learning aspects of any software. And fortunately enough for us, we live in a time where information is freely available. So I quickly picked up a piece of software called Blender, and tutorials were there, and I got really interested in it because I think for its 2.6 release, it suddenly had real-time rendering in the viewport. So you could actually see exactly what you were doing to the materials while you were tweaking them, which was amazing. And the renderer was very good. It was impressive for a piece of free software. So I started doing little things, making props like glasses or artwork or chairs or models that the client would request to possibly fit into something that they shot that they would want. And I did more and more tutorials, and eventually I started doing actually more 3D work than I was compositing. And that showed me that the industry was shifting, primarily in South African advertising. It wasn't. There was a shift where it sort of wasn't enough for you to just become a compositor. Well, and that's probably a little unfair, but in the studio that I was in, that was certainly the case, where you had to start sort of picking up on new software and new technology that you could use to make things easier and make things better. And as a result, I have essentially become a generalist. So not only compositing, but 3D work. And I was very interested in the beauty of 3D work. So lighting and simulations rather than modeling and rigging and character animation, because everybody that I was speaking to, especially animators, they really wanted, they were sold on this idea of animating for Pixar, but that just didn't really interest me. I wanted to make a beautiful backshot. If there was a bottle of shampoo, I could model that and I could light it, and it was wonderful because it tied in with photography and the play of light and simple things that you could just really make beautiful instead of character work. And that's essentially what brought me to moving into a solo career. Eventually, I decided to go solo, and I registered my own company called Post November. And I now do various jobs that include 3D work as well as compositing. So I essentially like to keep my work quite broad with what I'm doing, instead of just cleaning up and rotoscoping and painting up stuff. I find the 3D aspect quite fascinating, and it's an industry that is moving incredibly quickly. There seems to be a lot of companies now that are offering their software for free. If you look at the current advanced technology we've got, even in film, they are using Unreal Engine to light their scenes. And I'm sure everybody knows about The Mandalorian, but The Mandalorian was groundbreaking because everything was shot in a studio. And the set could be manipulated on the fly in real time. And what you're seeing through the lens is real time with 3D assets and lighting that you just cannot do with standard lighting equipment in a studio. It's very exciting. And that sort of leads me on to another point, quite an important point with the industry in general. There seems to be, it's very overwhelming at the moment. It's very difficult to sort of keep up with everything that's happening. If you just work in After Effects, for example, the amount of plugins that there are available, really, really powerful ones, from Red Giant is a good example. It takes a very long time to actually nail and get to grips with how powerful those plugins are. And that's just the plugins in one piece of compositing software. Then you've got Nuke, you've got Unreal Engine, you've got 3D packages, you've got individual pieces of software that do certain things. Like there is a granular simulator that I use called Storm that's primarily just for sand. And it does an amazing job, and it's just it's getting a little overwhelming with trying to keep up with everything that's happening and all the development that's currently going on in the software industry to aid the VFX artists. But it's also, on the flip side of that, it's very exciting. The all-in-one package, I suppose, would be Houdini, because you can do literally anything in it, and I think that's why it is the industry standard when it comes to very, very hardcore VFX work. But you don't have to limit yourself to that one piece of software, which is great. It's not built for everybody, and you have to sort of pick and choose what suits you and what suits your workflow, and you can still manage to do stuff that's as good as the Nike ads, without being in the industry for very long and without knowing things like Houdini inside and out. So there is a lot of pressure, but it's also just very exciting. You have to sort of keep up with what's happening, because in 5 years' time, things are going to be very, very different. With real-time rendering, with modeling, with lighting, it all changes very, very quickly. And you have to be on top of things. You know, we are, as artists, we're not purely focused on the beauty of things. We are problem solvers, and we need, more often than not, a solution that is efficient and works well and that makes sense. So I think we're sort of really blessed to be in a position and in a time where you can choose whatever you want to do, and the tools are available for you, and they are affordable, and training is free. So when it comes to dealing with agencies and clients, it of course, just like any other job, it can be difficult and it can be frustrating, because as artists, you sort of know what's going to work and what isn't. But it's really, really great to be challenged by these agencies and clients to create something that you would never have thought about. And it's a lot of fun. There's a synergy there between those three pillars: the effects artists or the studios, the agency, and the client. This wonderful dynamic that happens there, that can be extremely exciting. And when it all comes together and works together, then it's something that you can all really be proud of. That concludes my time here. Thank you, everyone, for listening to my rants, and looking forward to answering some questions.